All right, here's another piece. There are 7 or 8 varieties of this note. I think PMG is up to I. This is pick number 877, A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, I. The first two, A and B, have a different color back. This is the original piece, A and B, and it comes with and without watermark. And it's the one that has the green back with the watermark that's worth 3 figures. This is the second piece, C through I, which comes with all kinds of different varieties: intaglio, lithographs, letterpress seals, lithograph seals, watermark, no watermark, every combination you can think of except silk threads, and none of them have silk threads. I don't know, what was going on in China when they were making these, whether cost had something to do with it. Obviously, plain paper is cheaper than watermark paper, and lithograph seals are cheaper than letterpress seals, but if you're going to have to letterpress the serial number anyway, why not also do the seals? At any rate, what a counterfeiter wants to do is take one of these, which is cheap, and make one of these, which is not cheap, if it has the watermark in it. If it does not have the watermark, its value might be $20 or $30. But with the watermark, its value is going to be a couple 300 or and up, depending on the grade. And the ones without any of that decoration. Oh, I didn't mention that some have blue cereals and some have red cereals. That's another part of the way these varieties are working. So you want to take a note that has red cereals with a watermark with a brown back and turn it into one of these with a green back. Now here's the watermark that we're talking about. You see this open star here. A star, 5-pointed star with an open center, and another one over here. Another piece up here. Down here we got the star over here. And that's showing a star up here. They're not always easy to find. There's a piece of a star right here. Oh, and another piece right here. Now, these are randomly scattered through the paper. Well, they're not random in the paper, but they end up being random as the notes are printed on the paper, because they don't show up in the same place on every note. They show up in various places on various notes. So that's the watermark that you want to start with, that you want to turn into one of these notes up here with a green back. All right, which one do we got here? All right, this is the altered note. This is a doctored note. This is a genuine piece with the watermark and the green back. But I'll show you when we get to finish talking about this one. I'll show you a real anomaly on this one. This one was sold to me by a guy in China as a counterfeit of this note. And I could find the watermark, and I thought it was going to be the green note with no watermark. But as it turned out, and I didn't realize this for the longest time, when I finally got around to looking at it with 20 power, I found out that it was altered. That the green didn't start life on this note. The green got added to this note. Now, how did they do that? This is a genuine piece, and it's got what we call a variable tint. It starts out green here, and then turns gradually from green to brown, and it's completely brown. And as I recall, it turns back to green. Let's see if we've got, yeah, up here you can see that starts green here, turns brown, turns back to green down here. So what's called a variable tint, or it could be variable intaglio, but in this case it's not intaglio, it's a lithographed element. Here's what the alteration was. They printed the green over the brown on a genuine note. They didn't get it quite aligned, but to the naked eye, you can't make that out. And the rest of the note that has to be green, all that part down in the design elements, all the scroll work and leaves and flowers and whatever, throughout the note, the whole thing. Let's go back and look at. You can see it, where it turns green here. It's green on the left all the way down, and then green on the right all the way down. But it's not an abrupt change. It's a gradual change from one color to the other. That's a high security press. You can't do that on your backyard multilith press where you're going to get your church bulletins printed and things like that. Anytime you see that kind of a gradual change in color, whether it's intaglio or lithographed, you're not looking at a common press. You're looking at a security press. So here on the altered piece, they've added the green on top of the brown, which is what the note started out with in real life. Now this glistening part, I don't understand what is going on with that, because as I said, that doesn't show up as a naked eye. You're not conscious of that. I don't know what they were putting in this ink that caused that kind of granulation. But they did manage to get the change in color. Not properly. It's not a matter of green changing gradually to brown. They thinned out the green. They reduced the intensity of the green while introducing the brown, and then gradually increasing the intensity of the brown. So, this is very sophisticated work. You have to devise your plate so that the plate is going to get thinner and thinner in what is going to deliver with green. You actually have to, run this through the presses twice, once to print the green and once to print the brown. It finally changes to, solid brown down here. Now it's still on top of the original brown. You can see the original brown behind here.
Oh, come here, come.
Now here's where on the genuine note, where you have the gradual change from green to brown. And here's the altered note, where again, it reduces gradually in the green and then adds density to the brown.
Wow.
You get the change from green to brown. Alright, now as I said, this is the genuine piece down here. Well, when I got it, and I saw this down here, I was wondering what on earth is going on down here. Because this is hand drawn down in here. That's what it looks like with magnification. Well, as it turns out, this was originally an error note. That gradual change from green to brown, which should have appeared as a vertical line, was actually angled across the note. So it was brown over here where it should have been green. So they doctored this to put green back in where the gradual change had not occurred where it should have occurred. So they took a perfectly good error note and made a doctored note out of it. Well, this came out of a Spink Hong Kong auction. I called their attention to it, and they said, well, you're welcome to send it back. I said, no, thank you. I'll keep it, and everybody who sees the holder will see exactly where it came from. Okay, here's the 1990 50 yuan note. The 1980 note is a valuable note. The 1990 note is fairly common. I have a 1980. But what I don't have is an 80 altered, I'm sorry, a 90 altered to 80. They exist, and that's what we're going to talk about right now. All you have to do to make this into a 1980 note is change that one digit right there. Except that in 1990, they added a security thread, and they added something else. Now this security thread, you can pull that out. You wouldn't think that can happen, but if you use the right pair of forceps, you very gently open up the paper a little bit so you can get hold of that piece of thread. You can pull that thread right out of the paper, and there's no evidence left of it at all in terms of light coming through it. The paper density doesn't change. You don't see any light spot there where that used to be. If you side light it and look at it with incident light, you might be able to see where there's a bump where that used to be and is no longer there. But I wouldn't be surprised if after they pulled that out, they wet it a little bit and ironed it, and even the bump was going to be almost impossible to detect. What they haven't been able to do is take off the ultraviolet. They added in 1990 the denomination in Chinese, anglicized, and the denomination in numerals. So if you get a 1980 that you're spending a lot of money for, throw it under ultraviolet. If it says Wuxi 50, it was not a 1980 piece. It was a 1990 piece. It's been altered to 1980 by removing the thread and changing the digit. I've seen them. I haven't had a chance to buy one. All right, specimens. Everybody loves specimens. 0 serial numbers, fancy markings all over the place. And these notes are cheap as dirt as plain notes for circulation. The specimens, they're worth not a lot, but a lot more than they're worth as notes with regular serial numbers and no specimen markings. So what's a good counterfeiter to do? He's going to take off the serial number, put it back on as zeros, and then add all the specimen markings. Well, you've already seen one method of taking off the serial number by carving the paper. A less skillful or a technique which needs less skill is to just scrape the number off and then reprint with the zeros, and that's what happened with these. So they're all 342. We've got several denominations all in set number 342. Here's what a genuine specimen marking should look like. It's letterpress. You can see the ridges along the edges. You can see a couple of dropouts here. There's a different spot on the same note. And here's a different note. Let's see, is this the... Hard to tell whether that's letterpress or not. Okay, here's the fake specimen. This does not have light coming through it. No, it probably does. I can't remember how I made this photograph. But this is silk screened. The specimen markings on all of these notes you're going to see are silk screened except for some of the serial numbers, which are letterpress. So you've got silk screened specimen markings instead of letterpress specimens. Now here's a silk screened character in a specimen marking. You can see how ugly it looks. I mean, it's just not at all what you'd expect to see from a printed character. It's because it's not printed, it's silk screened. Here's more silk screening, very ragged edges. You sometimes, in many cases of silk screen, you have ridges along the edges, but the ridges look completely different from letterpress ridges. They're very high, and they just do not look like letterpress ridges because there's a lot more ink being pushed through that silk than you have on a letterpress die. Now here's where the serial numbers were scraped away, and you can see all the damage behind these zeros. The zeros are silk screened, and you can see all the damage behind in the tints where the old numbers were taken off by physical removal. There's a letterpress specimen serial number on the back of one of these notes. Now here's another denomination. In this case, we've got blue numbers down here instead of red. And there's a silk screened serial number, the same number, but silk screened on some of the notes instead of being letterpress. Now this really shows you the texture of the silk screen product. All these parallel lines are from the fabric that ink was pushed through when it was applied to the paper. And there's a silk screened numeral. There's another piece, same set, another 342. Now in this case, where they took off the numerals was right over where we had one of these transitions in the tint. You see that this tint here is changing from blue to pink right through this area here. There's another one of these progressive tints. And when they scraped these numerals and digits away, they damaged some of that tint, and they tried to restore it, but they didn't even use the same color. You can see here it's a blue violet changing to a lilac changing to a paler violet out here. They continued the blue all the way over into here, way further than it should have gone. And it's not even the right shade of blue. There's another area the same way, with the letterpress, the new letterpress zeros stuck on top. There's the letterpress serial number. Now look at these dates. 1980, 1996, 80 and 90. They expect us to believe that somebody in 1980 set aside set number 342 to wait for 1996 to come along? Come on, guys. How many legs do you need to pull? Now here's a case. This was not a counterfeit made for collectors. This was a counterfeit made for circulation, but it was so interesting. This is the genuine piece up here, and it's in Talio. It's a very nice piece of their ethnic series. And this is a lithographed counterfeit of it with this serial number on it, which is a running number. It's a letterpress number that goes up as they go along. Somebody publicized these numbers. They got into the press. And once the counterfeiters realized the jig was up of those, they scraped them off and put a new number right on top of the old number. So you can see here the RC 585, there's a 0, 9, and then 532. So, the last three digits on the one that they altered of their own work differed here, but all of this is the same. I wasn't going to buy this because I already had this counterfeit. I didn't need another counterfeit. But when I saw what this was, it was an alteration of the counterfeit to make it continue to be circulatable. I said, well, I've got to have that one too. So I now have, both. Now here we have a piece that's was sold to me as a fantasy. Actually, this is the one that was sold to me as a fantasy, and it looks like a fantasy. It's very ugly work. But then this piece showed up on eBay, very well circulated, and I said, well, maybe in fact it's not a fantasy. Maybe they did circulate some of those. So I bid to win and I got it. And this is back in the days when you could see who you were bidding against on eBay. And the guy in Germany, all right, now the name is escaping me. He's written all kinds of books about Chinese notes. He's a Chinese linguist, German national. Name will come to me when I need it in a minute, maybe. He was the underbidder, and he emailed me and he says, "All right, you bought the note I wanted. Would you at least send me a picture of it?" So I sent him a picture of it. Irwin, not Breyer. All right, can't remember his name. And I asked him, was it in fact a fantasy? And he says, yes, indeed, it was a fantasy. Those notes never circulated. So here's an example of how much they will distress a note to make it appear legitimate to sell to collectors. And this, usually a distress note, really doesn't look like true circulation. But this note does look like true circulation. I don't know how they did this damage to turn something like this into something like that, but they managed to do it. So I now have two examples of a fantasy, one apparently as it was prepared and one as it was doctored to sell to collectors. And that's my last slide, folks.